Oh no.
Oh no.
Disaster.
Oh, all my money, no.
Oh no.
This is a very last minute impromptu intro to this cash game and this vlog. Hopping into a live stream here at the Wynn Ballrooms, playing 2550 with some very fun faces. You recognize a few of these guys and girls, I'm sure. Some of them will be new to you, some of them are new to me as well. And this should be a fun one. 2550, maybe some straddles, maybe some bomb pots and stand-up game, and who knows what. But we're gonna get in the mix here. I got $10,000 on the table. Will there be more or less in my pocket by the end of this? Time will tell. All right, action underway here in this already epic lineup that is going to get even more epic as the night proceeds. Playing 2550 here currently without a straddle, but that won't be the case again as the night proceeds. But in this hand, 2550, Nate Silver comes in for the raise in the +2 spot up to $200, which is a 4x raise. Jamie makes the flat call in the cutoff, and action over to us in the small blind, looking down at ace king offsuit. This is a premium, even though the initial raise came from early position. Of course, we're going to go ahead and 3-bet this one. Just need to decide on sizing here. Again, the initial raise 4x, a little bit on the big side, but that's not going to stop us. Going ahead, putting in the 3-bet up to $1,000. We could have even gone bigger here. Out of position, one caller in between, but turns out it's good enough to get the job done versus Nate. He had the ace-3 suited. Jamie's out of there with an offsuit Broadway, dragging an early pot. Shortly after that, we see a larger pre-flop raise, this time from Vegas Matt in the form of a 5x pre-flop raise up to $250. Right next to him on his direct left, I've got the ace-queen suited on the dealer button, and I would almost always 3-bet this hand. Such a pretty hand, strong hand, especially late position versus late position. Obviously never played with the Vegas Matt before. He's a slots player and content creator, so obviously having no history before, not sure what he's coming in for a 5x raise with. If the raise size was smaller, 3-bet this one all day. Flat seems fine. Both of the blinds make the call as well. So we've got ourselves a multi-way flop here. A lot of the times we definitely want to try and knock out the blinds and take this one heads up in position, but I think with ace queen suited, it's going to perform multi-way okay. Anyway, we go 4 ways to a flop. Flop is not a very beneficial one, 7-6-3. We got one hard on there, but multi-way, 4 ways to this flop. Just going to check it back after action checks over to me. Turn doesn't help. Now there's 4 to a straight on the board. Small blind checks. Ape Styles, he's going to get after it here. Puts out a bet in the big blind. Vegas Matt is out of there. It turns out he had king 10 suited. Very reasonable. We can't continue with just ace high on this kind of a board. Benz gets out of there with king queen suited. And turns out we did have the best hand here. As you can see, definitely a good reason to go ahead and 3-bet pre-flop, knock out the blinds as mentioned, but always easier when you can see all the cards. All right, still in the early stages here with no straddle on. Jamie comes in for the raise in the +1 spot up to $125. Definitely a reasonable sizing. Over to us in the hijack, we've got ourselves a suited wheel ace. I say we get after it a little bit here. Let's go ahead and put it in the 3-bet, put these kind of hands into our 3-bet bluffing range. I go ahead and 3-bet it up to $400. Jamie's got a tough spot here. She's got an offsuit Broadway. She's out of position versus us. She's just going to let that one go. Makes sense to me. By the way, shout out to Jamie Kerstetter. She's the one who organized this game and put together this awesome lineup. She continues to do so many cool things for the poker community. She was hosting the ladies meetup game at the Wynn the very next day. So yeah, shout out to Jamie. All right, moving along here, looking down at a pretty good hand. Pocket jacks. We're in the +2 spot. Going to go ahead and raise it up to $150. Over to Ape Styles in the cutoff, who wants to play for more money, 3-betting it up to $500. Ape Styles is a very strong tournament player, one of the best out there, has had tons of success playing online poker tournaments. Cash games, not exactly his forte, but that's not going to matter too much. He's going to know how to navigate. I'm going to take a flop here. Don't want to just go bananas with the jacks. Toss in the call. Heads up to Queen 9-6, all hearts. Not the best flop, maybe not the worst ever, but obviously we're just checking it. Action checks through. Offsuit 7 on the turn. I guess we could start going for some protection. Not sure if he would check back with a queen on this board or his really strong hands all that often. But we have a very middle of the road type hand here with our jacks with no heart. So I decided to check it again. And once again, Ape Styles checks it back. Feeling pretty good about our hand now. And especially when it comes to another low card, I think we want to put out either a value bet or a blocker bet or some sort of a bet here. I think we can maybe do this with some cheap bluffs, maybe like an ace-jack type of a hand, ace-10 suited, something that loses to the ace-kings of the world. I decided on the small sizing of $250, which gets called very quickly.
I showed on the jacks, and the jacks are good versus the 10-9 suited. Moving right along here, we're up about $1,000. Let's raise up the ace-10 offsuit out of the +1 spot. Not a mandatory raise, but let's get after it. Over to Nate on the dealer button, who makes the call. And this is a good time to note that Conrad is playing under very special circumstances here. He was bought into this game by Ben's for $5,000 as a free roll, under the conditions that he can only look at one card pre-flop, and then he can look at the other card post-flop. So Conrad is in there doing some things, looking at one card here pre-flop, makes the call out of the small blind. Jamie also makes the call in the big blind, and we've got ourselves a 4-way flop. Ace-Jack 3, 2 diamonds, that's top pair. Sometimes I'll check it, sometimes I'll bet it. I'm in a betting mood. Let's bet $200. Nate and Conrad out of there. Conrad had the King-7 offsuit. Surely he looked at the King pre-flop, but no connection for him. Jamie makes the call. We go heads up to the 6 of clubs, which puts out 2 flush draws now. She checks it over to me. Definitely going to go for some more value here. I think we want to go on the large side with those 2 flush draws and some straight draws available. Size out $800 here. Maybe could have even gone a little bit bigger, but that seems fine. That's good enough to win the pot. Jamie makes a good fold with top pair. Everyone is showing down one card after they drag in the pot. That's why we show the 10 onto the next hand. All right, the straddle is on now, playing 25, 50, 100. It's not going to be a mandatory thing, but it will be on a lot of the time. We've got ourselves a suited Broadway holding, King Jack of clubs. That's pretty. I'm going to raise it up, $250. Brad defends the straddle. So heads up, myself versus a young Bradley Owen to 9, 8, 3, 2 hearts, 1 club. 2 overs, bunch of backdoor stuff. Let's go ahead and fire. Don't want to go too small here because there's so many holdings that can continue on this kind of a flop. I fire out for a $250 C-bet, which Brad calls. Turn kills all of those backdoor dreams. Offsuit 5. Brad checks. I'm going to check this one back. Take a free card here. River does nothing to improve our hand. We've got King High. Brad fires out for $300. We're out of there. He's got himself top pair. That is good. All right, so I mentioned the circumstances that Conrad was playing under, and it was going well for a little bit for him. He managed to double up in a very funny spot versus Ape Styles, but unfortunately the tides have turned for him, and his one card pre-flop strategy has not panned out in the long term. And he's down to his final $725 in this hand when there is, it looks like, an early position limp from Ben's $50. Brad goes ahead and raises it up in the +2 spot. Conrad rips it in there for his last $725 because why not? Vegas Matt makes the cold call out of the small blind, and we've got ourselves pocket threes. This is a fun and friendly game. I'm in there with a pair. I make the cold call as well. Brad somehow gets out of the way. Not sure how that's possible, but we are going 4 ways to a flop here with a small pair. Good news, bad news, we flop ourselves a straight draw. It's not all that much to be proud of, though, of course, on an ace-high board. Action checks around, and we see a much more favorable card on the turn. It's the 3 of hearts giving us a set. Vegas Matt checks. We're going to put out a small bet here. That's good enough to clear the field aside from Conrad, who has himself the 10-7 offsuit and is drawing dead to a chop. Unfortunately for him, that chop does not come on the river. Set of 3 is good. Profit $2,375 according to the graphics here in a fun one. And we say goodbye to Conrad. It was a fun adventure for him, as mentioned. He did find a double up, but couldn't keep it going with that wacky strategy. Always a treat having Conrad both at the table and in the poker world. Take a look at the scoreboard here. Things going well in the early going. Plus $3,500 profit. Not a bad day so far, hanging out with some friendly faces. All right, Conrad is replaced by Frankie, who is a young man who has just moved to Las Vegas. He's been after it in the content streets, more so under the name Next Gen Poker, part of a trio of young dudes that are getting after it in poker content. He's also got his own channel, Frankie C, another one of the nice guys in poker. No action in this hand as action folds around to us holding ace-queen offsuit. Don't appreciate that one bit, boys and girls, but moving on. All right, the aforementioned Frankie coming in for the raise off of the dealer button. Jamie's out of there in small blind, over to us in the big blind, 5-4 offsuit. Pretty trashy, but we didn't come all the way to the Win Las Vegas from downtown Las Vegas, where I live, to fold anything basically that is connected. So I make the call, heads up to a flop of King Jack 5, 2 clubs. That's a pair. I check. Frankie puts out a C-bet, $100. I'm in there with my pair. Turn is useless. I check. Frankie wagering lots more money this time. Gonna have to give him some credit here with our bottom pair. Can't just hang on. We let it go, and he's got himself top 2 pair. Easy game. Moving along here. Jamie Kerstetter coming in for the raise, the +1 spot, which makes it 150 bucks to go with no straddle on. We've got a suited Broadway holding. Not many prettier hands in the world than Queen Jack of Hearts. I'm going to go ahead, 3-bet this one up to 450 bucks. Benz makes the cold call in the cutoff. He's another one of the slot players / content creators. He's in there, and Jamie is in there as well. So 3 ways in a 3-bet pot. This flop, that's a pretty favorable one. 10-9-8 with 2 diamonds. That's the joint. And not only that, but this kind of flop is going to smash my opponents, especially in the cold calling range. A lot of the times, those cold calling hands are going to be hands such as jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s, all this kind of stuff that really connects with this flop a lot of the time. So I think instead of c-betting here, and if I'm going to play a very balanced style of poker, this kind of super connected flop is going to be a check a lot of the time. I do that, I check it over to Ben's, but unfortunately he checks this one back. So no action here on this beautiful flop. Turn is an offsuit 6, putting 4 to a straight on the board, and Jamie now takes the lead, betting into us for 300 bucks. I don't think it makes a ton of sense to go ahead and put in the raise on this turn card, even though, as you can see, we have the absolute nuts. If you just want to close your eyes and blindly pile the money in when you have strong hands, of course, that's a very reasonable strategy. I decide to call here, and Ben's calls behind me, of course, which we love to see. Still 3 ways to a river card here, which is an offsuit 7. So now there's a straight on board, and anybody who happens to have a jack, we're going to be able to get a lot of money from here. So even though Jamie now checks, I don't hate this card, and I think we want to go for a ton of value. It's pretty unlikely that we have the hand that we're holding since we checked the flop and just flat call on the turn. So if someone has a jack, they're definitely going to pay off for a big amount here. We might even be able to get a call from a non-believer hoping to get the chop. Fire out for a bunch of money here, which is an overbet, $3,500. Benz doesn't think about it for too long. Turns out he had pocket deuces. Not going to be able to get too much value from that hand. He lets it go. And over to Jamie, who it turns out she turned a straight with the ace-7 of clubs. In hindsight, knowing her hand and the hand behind me, of course, I wish I would put in a raise or a bet. Think we end up winning the minimum here because she lets it go on the river as well. Not sure she entirely believes us, but she lets it go. And we have to show one card here as we're doing. So I show the queen. Hindsight is 2020. Let me go back in time and just start piling a bunch of money in on earlier streets. All right, moving along here. Ace-9 offsuit. Definitely a less than premium hand, but we came to play some cards. I raised it up to 150 bucks in the +1 spot. Benz makes the flat call out of the hijack. Frankie's in there in the big blind. 3 ways to king, 9, 3, 2 diamonds. Gives us middle pair top kicker. When we're in these 3-way pots and we're in the middle of the other 2 players on the flop, after Frankie checks it, I'm checking a lot of my range here. That's if I'm playing good poker, which I try to do normally. Happy to do that with middle pair. And this time, Benz puts out a wager of $300. Frankie is out of there with his nothing. Of course, we are going absolutely nowhere. I see your $300. Let's head to a turn card heads up. Bottom card on the flop, pairs now on the repeat 3. Checking it over to Mr. Benz again. Can't be too much here when he fires out again, this time for $700. Would he fire like this with a worse 9? Maybe, maybe not, probably not. Can't beat a king, can't beat a 3. There are some draws available out there, but he fired into 2 opponents on the flop, firing again here on the turn. It is tough to make a pair, but I don't know. Again, never played with Mr. Benz. Not too sure where I'm at here. I decide to let it go. The one card that he rolls over is a paint card, and as we can see, he found the 2-barrel bluff with the Queen Jack offsuit. Well played, sir. Queen High not going to win at showdown. He does have 2 overs and a gut shot versus our middle pair, but aggression wins in this case. Quick look at the scoreboard. Not too much has changed since the last one. Up $3,600. Poker continues, boys and girls. This time, Jamie coming in for the limp. And this is a good time to mention that we are playing the stand-up game, aka the nit game. These green pucks that you see on the table, those are the players that are safe from the nit game. Anyone who does not have a green puck is not safe. And those 2 people that remain who do not have green pucks are myself and Jamie. So after Jamie limps in, I'm incentivized to play a bunch of hands and try and win a pot before she does. And that's why I limp in with this awful looking Jack 5 offsuit. No raises as Nate checks his big blind. We go 3 ways to a flop that comes down Queen 10 8, which gives us basically nothing other than a gut shot and a blocker. But all those things are a lot more important when you're amongst the last 2 players to not win a hand in the nit game. And so when Nate leads out on this flop and Jamie gets out of the way, I think we have to try and leverage this Jack of Spades in our favor. Gonna go ahead and get after it here. Nate let out for $50. Let's go ahead and start repping a straight or something. Raise it up to 150 bucks. Typically don't think this bet is going to get the job done right away, but it helps us tell a story from the get-go. Nate does toss in the call, and we are off to a turn card, which changes nothing if I had that straight that I am representing. Still going to have the nuts here if I have Jack 9. That's the story I'm trying to tell. Nate checks it over to me. Let's grab some chips. Let's wager some money. Hope this gets through because we have Jack high. I decide $375. It turns out that is enough to get it through. Nate had himself second pair. Tough to hang on to that one over multiple streets, which is good news. We get to showdown the Jack 5 offsuit. Got to show your hand in order to get one of those knit buttons. Be safe in the knit game. Unfortunately for Jamie, she's going to have to pay out $100 per player. So we collect an additional $100 after this pot. Moving along here, we've got $14,000 in our stack. And when Frankie comes in for the raise off the dealer button, I'm going to grab some chips off of that stack and toss it in with an ace defending the big blind. So heads up to a flop that comes down. Queen 8-4 helps us not at all. I check it. Frankie checks it back. We see a free card on the turn, which is the 7 of spades, third spade. Got ourselves nothing but a gut shot. Check it. Frankie checks it once again, which allows us one more free card, which gives us a straight. Straights are good hands. I'm going to bet some money, $125 worth of value. Call that if you hate money, Frankie. Turns out he hates money. He makes the call. Ship this giant pot our way. Take that, son. That's a lesson for you. I don't know what the lesson is other than straights are good. Moving right along here. No straddle on. Let's raise it up. I make it 150 win dollars. Out of the cutoff, Jack 10 offsuit. Jack 10, such a fun hand, no? Benz makes the call on the dealer button, so we go heads up out of position versus that man. 7-3 deuce, some backdoors, 2 overs. Don't want to just check call here with Jack high, so I fire out 150 bucks. Our opponent makes the call. Turns an ace, generally a better card for my range, although he could certainly float with some ace highs. We can't make top pair anymore, and our backdoor dreams are dead, so I decide to check it, and Benz quickly checks it back. River's a 3 of diamonds. The hearts brick out. We don't block those. Got ourselves Jack high. That's probably not going to win at showdown. So we're not really telling too strong of a story here. If we decide to bet it, I think we're going to bet all of our strong aces on the turn. Could have a hand like kings, queens, jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s. Definitely need to find some bluffs in this spot. Jack high, no heart seems like a good one. Let's go ahead and wager some money. See if we can get this one through. $350 with nothing but hopes and dreams of trying to take this one down. Benz goes into the tank here, starts talking. So you got an ace?
Dude, shout out to the Hand History Lounge.
I do.
And Andrew there getting caught in the bluff.
All right, straddle is on 25, 50, 100. I am in that straddle spot. Benz comes in for the limp in the +1 spot. Brad getting after it versus that limp, puts in the raise in the cutoff spot, raised up to $350. Got ourselves pocket 8s, very good hand in the straddle spot. Happy to see a flop. Benz makes the call. 2 poker players and a slot player going heads up to a flop that comes down 10, 9, 7, 2 diamonds, gives us an open ender with our pair. I check it. Benz checks it over to the initial raiser. That's Brad. He puts out a C bet, which is pretty strong on this kind of a board versus 2 opponents. Don't think he's going to do this with an ace-king type hand, ace-queen. I guess ace-jack has a blocker, but I think he would check that one back a lot of the time versus 2 opponents on a flop that would connect pretty well with a lot of ranges. So when he does c-bet, looks like it's pretty strong. I make the call. Over to Mr. Benz now, who does not make the call. He puts in a bunch of chips. Big raise here. Brad snap folds. Turns out he had king 9 offsuit, as mentioned, getting after it, getting after the limper in that kind of a spot. Kind of surprised to see him c-bet here, but I guess his hand does benefit from some protection. Unfortunately, this puts us in a very tough spot now. Just have a pair of 8s, which is an open-ender, but there's 2 diamonds out there. And we could be drawing to a chop versus the jack 8. Don't have great equity versus a set. And the raise size is not small. To top it off, we're out of position here. So this is just all sorts of things that makes this a pretty tough spot, even though it is a pair plus open ender. The raise size is $2,600. And as mentioned, this flop can connect with a bunch of opponents' range. So I don't know, I'm just not loving the spot. Doesn't feel great. Not sure which outs are clean. Maybe if we have 1 diamond, we can continue here. The pocket 8s, it just doesn't feel all that great. So nobody likes folding a pair plus a straight draw, but that's what I decided to do. Decided to just chuck it in there, not really loving the spot, let it go. And we see that Benz has ace 8, which we have in terrible shape, 54 to 15%. You can see in the equities there, which is kind of miserable after letting my hand go. So, as mentioned, not loving it. Love it even less after seeing the cards. Nice hand, Benz. Well done. Honestly, I blame Brad for that one. How does he c-bet the flop? A king 9 offsuit versus 2 opponents. What do you Picking up the pieces, moving right along here. Ape Styles coming in for the raise, $150. We've got a suited ace in the big blind, going nowhere. I make the call, and we're off to a flop that gives us top pair on the ace, queen, 3, 2 spades. Check out Ape Styles. He puts out a small c-bet, $100. Obviously, we're going nowhere. Turn, very pretty one. 8 of hearts. 2 flush draws on board now, gives us aces up. Can beat every 2 pair aside from ace queen now. Happy to see Ape Styles reaching for some additional money here. And unsurprisingly, he makes a large wager here. With $525 in the pot, he continues for $900. Oftentimes that is the case when he's got himself a range advantage and there are 2 flush draws on board now. If you're going to continue, you should probably do so for a large sizing. Overbet makes a lot of sense. I don't think we want to check raise now versus the large sizing. If you bet smaller, I'm sure there's some small bets to be found here, maybe not too often, but if you did bet smaller, I think we could find a check raise versus the overbet. We're just going to check call, keep his bluffs in there. We are still losing to some hands, of course, but happy to make this call here with 2 pair. I feign a little bit of weakness and some thought here, but of course we're loving this with aces up. Toss in the $900 and let's see a river card. Kind of looking for a brick here. River is somewhat bricky, could be more bricky. It's an offsuit jack, so both of the flush draws do miss. A hand like King 10 gets there. Don't think he's going to have pocket jacks. He could have ace jack. I do think he'll still be happy to put in that large sizing with a hand like ace jack, especially with 2 flush draws on board as mentioned. We're going to stay in flow here, of course. Check it over to Ape Styles once again. And once again, Ape Styles grabs some chips. It's not a small amount. It's a large amount. It's another overbet, this time $3,000. As mentioned, Ape Styles, one of the best in the world, especially when it comes to multi-table tournaments. A lot of those skills are going to carry over to these kinds of spots in cash games, and good players are always going to be able to find some big bluffs in all kinds of spots. I'm not sure if we beat too much value in this spot. I don't know if he's going to go for this kind of a sizing with ace king. Loses to all sorts of other aces at this point. We also have some removal to that hand, so I don't know how often he's going to have that hand. But as mentioned, we unblock both of the flush draws, and I think he can find plenty of bluffs with a hand like jack 10. Turns a double gutter, and that's not to mention all the busted flush draws that I've already mentioned. And so with a holding like ace 8, can we find a fold here? I don't exactly love it anymore, but it just feels pretty mandatory. We do lose to some hands, but I'm going nowhere. Not in a live stream cash game, not in a creator cash game. I'm tossing in the call what you got, Ape Styles, and what he has is the goods. It's a bit of a cold deck to say the least here. Flops middle set versus top pair. That top pair turns into 2 pair, and he's got himself a hand that can just lay down the hammer on all the streets. He unblocks top pair. There's 2 flush draws as mentioned. Straight draws available. He just gets to go for max value, and we have a hand that is able to pay off for max value. Definitely a tough spot, run into it there, as mentioned, versus a tough player like Ape Styles. Those kinds of collisions are just going to cost money. Doesn't feel great, of course, because as we were just cruising along here, having ourselves a nice little afternoon/evening with some friendly faces, that hand cost us $4,150. Guaranteed to lose a bunch of money there. Poker can be tough. All right, I'm furious now. I'm absolutely steaming. We're in the hijack. We got queen 9 offsuit. Let's raise. $150 it is. Over to Brad in the small blind. He calls. I'm angry. Heads up to a flop. 2 aces and an 8. I'm going to be the one to have the strongest hands on this kind of a board. Always c-betting. He checks it. I wager $75. Since I'm betting with basically my full range, small bet makes sense there. Brad agrees to the price. We're off to a turn card. 10 of spades, second spade gives us a gut shot. We're still going to have all the strongest hands here. Not to mention, I'm steaming my absolute face off. I'm going to keep firing here. Not 1 black chip, but 2 black chips. I wager 200 United States dollars. That's good enough to get the job done versus the 8-7 of clubs. Kind of tough to hang on with just the 1 pair. Makes sense. Good to drag a pot, but I'm not going to lie. I'm still a little bit annoyed by that last hand with the ace 8 versus the queens. Anyway, it feels good to drag in a pot, however small. All right, on to the next hand, we've got yet another very friendly face joining us on my direct right. That's none other than Jason Somerville, the legend. We don't see him too often in the poker streets these days. He's been getting it done out there in sports betting land, but it's always a treat to have him at the table, even though he is a legend and fantastic poker player. Just one of those guys you want to be around and spend a lot of time with. Picking up the action here, we're in the hijack. We've got an ace. Still very angry, of course, though. I put in the raise up to $150. Brad makes the call out of the small blind. So yet another collision with myself and Brad Owen. Flop comes king 9 deuce with 2 hearts, 1 diamond. We've got absolutely nothing on this flop, but we can represent hands such as aces, kings, ace king, king queen, etc., etc. So Brad checks. I wager $100. Brad calls. Turns to 8 of hearts. We don't have a heart. We don't have anything, as a matter of fact. I decided to check it back, and we see the 3 of diamonds on the river, which didn't change anything. But when Brad starts assembling chips, I don't think we just want to call down with ace 5 offsuit here. There's not too much that misses on this flop, so I'll go ahead and let it go. But turns out Brad does have something that missed on this flop. He's got himself the queen high. For a gutter ball, he's got himself a heart in his hand. Obviously makes sense to fire out a river bluff. Nice hand, sir. Nice hand. All right, straddle is on. Jason Somerville with the $100 straddle. We've got ourselves Queen Jack offsuit, the +1 spot. Let's get after it with 2 Broadway cards and make it $250 to go. Ben's in the hijack, makes the call. Everyone else out of the way. So heads up versus my neighbor here on the table. It's a 10-5-5 with 2 hearts. Once again, one of those kinds of spots where we've got ourselves 2 overcards and some backdoor stuff going on. So don't want to just check call here. Can barrel on some good straightening cards. Can turn top pair. I bet $150, which Ben's calls. Very similar spot as before. 7 of clubs, kills all our backdoor dreams. Check it over to Ben's, who starts grabbing some chips, getting ready to wager, and we don't wait for him to make that wager. Just go ahead and chuck that one in. Starts out he's got Queen 10 of clubs, which we had in pretty rough shape pre-flop, but post-flop he has us in very rough shape. All right, good news, boys and girls. The good news is Frankie coming in for the raise in the +1 spot to $150, and we are looking down at a premium. Pocket Kings, we're chilling in Stuckville now. We've got about $7,500 in front of us. Put $500 of that to work in the form of a 3-bet. Back over to Frankie, who makes the call. Heads up to 10-7-6 with 2 clubs. Don't love this flop, of course. It's pretty connected. There's a bunch of holdings that could either have us beat or have a bunch of equity. But do we want to give a free card? No. No, sir. No, ma'am. I will have some hands that connect with this board, too. I can 3-bet with suited connectors. I can 3-bet with pocket 10s. I can 3-bet with nut clubs. Find a C-bet with all kinds of holdings here. Going to do that with my pocket kings. $350, and that is good enough versus the ace 3 of hearts. More paint, but not paired this time. King, Queen offsuit in the hijack. Good enough for a raise up to $150 out of the hijack. Mr. Brad Owen decides that's not enough money, though. 3-betting us out of the small blind up to $600. King, Queen offsuit, maybe some reverse implied odds here, but we're in position. We're playing on a live stream, and I didn't come all the way. All right, I'm making the call. Let's go. Heads up to a flop. Queen, Jack 10 rainbow is definitely an interesting one because our opponent here is going to have the range advantage. He's going to be the only one to have ace king almost all the time. He's going to be the one to have queens, jacks. I guess I could have 10s and probably wouldn't 4-bet. He's also going to have pocket aces and pocket kings. So we definitely do not have the range advantage here, but we have a hand that connects pretty well with this board. We've got ourselves top pair plus an open ender, and we have good removal to some of those very strong hands. Expect Brad to put out a C-bet here basically all the time for reasons mentioned, which right on cue he does in the form of $800. Got ourselves basically the easiest call in the world. Turn is a total brick offsuit 4. I think if Brad has a total air ball, say something like 5-6 suited, he'll give up here a lot of the time. Obviously, if he has a strong hand, he's going to continue. And I think he can find some bluffs here. I think if he has a hand like ace 5 suited, something with removal to ace king, I think he'll be able to find those continued C bets. We still have top pair open ender. So even though he bets 2 yellow chips, $2,000, we don't have too much of a choice here. Going to have to make the call. Heading to a river card, looking for some help or looking to pick off some bluffs here. And the help does not arrive. Another brick. So nothing changes as the board runs out on later streets. And nothing changes in Brad's actions. He decides to wager all of the money, which is going to put us in a not very fun spot here. Clearly, we don't beat any value bets. He's not doing this with ace jack, turning that into a bluff when he's got pretty good showdown. So he's either going to have a hand such as ace king, pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket 10s, or a hand, as mentioned, like ace 5 suited through ace deuce suited. Something that has removal to the nuts, but obviously is not going to win at showdown. Is my opponent capable of doing that in these kinds of spots? Absolutely. Do we have removal to some strong hands? Yes, we do. As mentioned, we have removal to ace king, pocket queens, pocket kings. Of course, there's some combos there, and having removal is not a perfect science. It just leans the probabilities a little bit closer to him having some bluffs. But is he going to unload the clip versus me? Tough to say, but sometimes the hands just play themselves, and I think he's going to be able to find the spots. I don't love it, and this is going to be my longest tank of the night. Go well into the tank here. Table is chatty, table gets quiet, table gets chatty again, and I am hemming and hawing. It's tough to make top pair in a poker game, you know? It's tough to make top pair and have removal to strong hands, and nobody likes a nit. So all those factors combined, along with my opponent being a capable one and being able to find some bluffs, I think you could basically flip a coin in this spot. But when that's the case and we're on a stream, I'm here for action. I decide to toss in the call, and we get shown pocket 10s for the goods. Bottom set on the flop. He gets the super clean run out. Allows him to just once again unload the clip. Similar to that hand where Ape Styles flopped a set. You get a very good run out, and your opponent also has some connectivity here. I could definitely be swayed into the folding camp here on the river. just one pair. Don't beat any value bets, but I think I'm okay with it. I know it looks like a very light call off versus Brad, who's maybe not going to be bluffing me, but I think he will be. I think he can find some spots. Anyway, we're going to lose a big one here to our buddy Brad. Nice hand, sir. All right, unfortunately, the tide has definitely turned at this point in the game. We had a smooth sailing early going. We were up about $4,000, and now we are on the opposite side of that coin. We are down $10,000, and we have reloaded for another 10K into this game, into it for $20,000. Do we love it? No. Are we going to straddle? Yes. I put the straddle on. $100 to go, boys. Jason completes out of the big blind, and I check it back with 7-3 offsuit. 9-8-4 doesn't really help us. Jason checks it. I'm just going to check this one back. Turns to 5 of diamonds. Obviously, we still have nothing here, but when Jason checks it over to me, it really feels like he doesn't have too much himself. And at least we block some straights, so I don't think we want to just check down 7 high here. Going to go ahead, put out a wager of $75. Jason agrees to the price, makes the call, and we see the 6 of diamonds on the river, which is the 3rd diamond, but as mentioned, 6 gives us a straight, and those are good hands. You know what's even better than a straight? A 7-card straight. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Jason checks over to me. I'm wagering with my 7-card straight, this time for $200. Jason thinking about it for a little while, but as we can see, I don't think he's thinking about calling. He's probably thinking about check raising here. He's got himself the ace of diamonds offsuit 3. Doesn't want to call with that. If he puts in a huge raise, he's thinking, well, I'm the only one that can have the nut flush here. Maybe I should do that, but he thinks better of it. Lets it go, and we collect a small one versus our buddy. Lose $10,000 one hand, win $200 the next hand. It's a wash. We'll call it a wash. All right, guys, picking up the action here. Steam has not diminished. We are in Steam mode. And so when we see the $100 under the gun straddle, we see a raise from Brad in the +1 spot, and we see Queen 9 suited in the small blind. You guys know what I want to do. You guys know what I feel like doing. I feel like re-raising. Let's put in this suited gapper out of the small blind, out of position, into our 3-bet range, because why not? Assemble some chips here to the tune of $1,500 or so. Drop those over the betting line. Ape Styles has ace-5 offsuit in the under the gun spot. He is out of there. And back over to Brad, who pretty quickly folds ace-queen offsuit. Easy game, I guess. By the way, I suggest scrolling this video back. Let's roll this video back a little bit so we can hear this fantastic impression of Daniel Negreanu from Jason Somerville.
The first time I had $1 million, I told Negreanu I had $1 million, and he was like, "Is this your first time with $1 million?" And I was like, "Yes." He goes, "Ha! You'll lose it for sure."
That was a great impression.
Straddle on in this hand in front of Nate Silver. Graphics are a little bit off here. The action graphics are not quite right because this is, I believe, an open raise from Nate Silver in the under the gun spot up to $200 before action gets over to us with pocket jacks in the cutoff. Obviously 3-bettable. Let's do that. I go ahead and 3-bet this one up to 600. Benz, he makes the cold call out of the dealer spot before action over to Brad in the big blind, who puts in the re-raise, and it's no small re-raise. It's up to $3,000 to go. Pretty interesting spot here. And Nate Silver gets out of the way. We can see he had ace-5 suited. As mentioned, very interesting spot in which I take just about 0 time to make my decision in, because this is a super strong re-raise from Brad. The cold 4-bet. Keep in mind that the initial raise came from Nate Silver up to $200. We 3-bet. Ben's cold calls, and now Brad is putting in the 4-bet while he still has Nate behind him yet to react to my 3-bet. So after Nate gets out of the way, it's going to take me longer to explain what I do here than it took me to actually act in the moment. Just going to go ahead and chuck these pocket jacks into the muck because this looks so strong from Brad. Benz gets out of the way with his king 6 suited that he was trying to gamble with, and turns out Brad has pocket queens. So maybe I made a light call off versus him earlier, but at least we can take some solace in knowing that we made a pretty good fold here, and it took me basically no time to do it with these pocket jacks. Chuck those into the muck. Brad's got the winner with the pocket queens. All right, we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit later on. We got more poker to play, and in this hand, the $100 straddle is on again. We see a raise from Frankie on the dealer button up to $300. We got 6-5 suited in the big blind. Could definitely go either way here. Could 3-bet out of position. Could flat call in the big blind. I think if I were in the small blind, I would be much more inclined to put in that 3-bet, getting a little bit better of a price in the big blinds. There's one less player behind us, so I just decided to flat call here. Benz does make the call, and we go through ways to a flop. Flop comes down, all spades. We do make a pair. Not super proud of that pair, so I check it. Benz checks it. Frankie gathers some chips, puts out a wager. I think we can call some bets here. Don't want to call too large of a bet. Frankie does bet $600 here. Looking back, I'm not quite sure. Maybe we can just find a fold here 3 ways with no spade in our hand, just a pair of 5s. But pairs are hard to make. I toss in the call. Ben's calls behind me, so not loving it. Still 3 ways to a turn card here that gives us 2 pair, but unfortunately it is the 4th spade. I check it. Benz checks it over to Frankie. He decides to check this one back. Definitely not loving the situation, even though we have double the pairs now. 4 spades on board, 3 ways. Unless we can make a full house here, just trying to get to showdown and not really looking to put too much more money into this pot. We do not make a full house on the offsuit 8. Check it over to Benz. Benz checks it over to Frankie. Frankie decides he wants to wager some money. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be able to get to showdown here with our 2 pair 3 ways, especially when we see yellow chip in action. Frankie bets $1,000. I'm sure he's good enough to find some bluffs here in this spot, even 3 ways once we check it to him on all streets. But 4 to a straight, 4 to a flush out there. Just going to have to make the fold here, I think, with our 2 pair. Benz evacuates right away, and as we can see, Frankie has the goods. He had 2 overs plus the queen high flush draw on the flop. That comes home, and we cannot re-get there versus that hand. All right, straddle line in front of Ape Styles. Frankie coming in for the raise once again, this time in the cutoff spot. $250 to go. Jason Somerville makes the call on the dealer spot, and we look down at a nice looking hand. 2 ladies this time. Pocket queens, we're going to re-raise. I slide a 5K chip out there. I'm not betting all 5K. I'm betting $1,200 out of that 5K. 3-betted up in this spot. Gets to the straddler and the initial raiser, but Jason Somerville, he's not easy. He's going to play in position on the dealer spot. Calls again, and we're going heads up to a flop. Ace, Jack 4, obviously not the flop of dreams here when we have pocket queens. We are going to have the range advantage. Don't want to take my foot off the gas and give Jason an opportunity to take this away from us on any particular street. So I bet out a small wager of $600. Going to do that since, again, we're going to be betting this flop a lot of the time. We're going to have the strongest range here. So despite not loving it this time, we are going to go ahead and put in the C-bet, and it's good enough to get through the 9-8 of spades of Jason Somerville. Good to drag a pop because things were not going our way recently. We're still in the hole, just about $10,000 at this point, though. All right, action continues. The lineup has gotten even more epic, and we now have a young Ethan Rampage Yao taking Jamie Kerstetter's seat. What a lineup we have at this point. Poker continues. We've got ourselves 10-7 suited in the under the gun spot with a straddle on. Is this mandatory play? No. Are we going to play it? Yes. $250 to go, boys. Only Mr. Benz on my direct left makes the call. Pretty good flop here for the 10-7 suited. 6-4-3 with 2 spades. This is another one of those spots where I don't think you have to play balanced type poker, meaning I would normally check this flop since these low to middling connected boards are going to be better for the pre-flop caller typically than the initial early position raiser. So with that being the case, I do decide to check it, and I am going to go for the check raise here if we face a bet, but we do not. Benz checks back pretty quickly. And again, I don't think you have to play balanced when you're playing live poker, but not worried about too many cards here. And like I said, I was going to go for the check raise. Don't get the opportunity, and we go to a turn card, which gives us the flush right away. Going to start going for value now. Drop 3 black chips over the betting line, but Benz, he's got absolutely nothing. Jack 10 offsuit. That's about as nothing as you could get on this board. No value to be had here. Double straddle on in this hand, and we are playing the nit game. 25, 50, 100, 200 with the nit game in progress. We look down at Queen Jack offsuit. I'm going to raise it up. 2 Broadway cards and make it $500 to go. Benz calls on my direct left in the cutoff. Everyone else out of the way. Heads up to ace, ace, 6. These double ace boards always going to be better for the pre-flop raiser. Going to bet here basically all the time. Don't need to bet big. $300 it is. Benz makes the call pretty quickly. Turns a pretty good one for us. We make the best 2-pair hand typically a lot of the time. If my opponent had something like deuces through 10s, all of which seems reasonable, now we are ahead. Of course, we're still losing to trip aces. And with the flop being so dry as it is, I don't think we have to worry about getting protection from too many hands. If there was a flush draw on board, maybe we could find another bet here. But if he does have one of those middling pairs, that's only a couple of outs. So I decided to slow it down with a check. Benz thinks and then checks it back. River 8 of clubs, I feel like I have the best hand here a lot of the time. even have a club in my hand to worry about flushes even less. Betting for value here, I'm going to put out a small wager, $350, just targeting those small pairs. Ben says the king 10 of diamonds, that's just king high. Once again, no value to be found versus his hand. Claw back a little bit, only stuck $8,225 now. Just 4 figures, could be worse. Could be in the 5-figure range, only 4. And we move along. Straddle on once again in front of Nate this time. Action over to us in the cutoff, looking down at ace queen offsuit. Very easy raise up to $250. Over to Nate. He wants to defend that straddle, tosses in the call. Heads up to jack 7-5 rainbow. Could c-bet or we could check back. Typically on these flops when we have ourselves ace high, if we can fold out slightly better ace highs, I think it makes more sense to put in a c-bet. Of course, there's some other reasons to put in a c-bet. We can fold out some hands that have some equity, but I think checking back with a good ace high makes sense here. Turn's a good one. It's the ace of diamonds. That, my friends, is top pair. Pretty damn good kicker. That adds up to a wager in my book. Now we're going to fire out here. Don't need to down bet, I don't think. We're basically representing exactly what we have here. A strong ace high to check back on the flop. I bet 400 United States dollars. Nate thinks about it for a little bit before chucking in the call. River's a 9. Nate checks it over to me again. I think we have to go for some value here. Ace deuce through ace 10 seems like they are all within range. Definitely want to try and go for value versus all of those holdings. I'm going to bet large here. $13.75 in the pot. Let's bet large. I bet $1,200 trying to get all the value versus those worse aces. And my opponent is not in the mood for a $1,200 wager. He grabs a lot more chips than that. A bunch of yellows and a purple chip. All of that adds up to $5,500, which is not the response that I was looking for. Clearly, there's not a lot of straight draws that do come home here. 6-8 suited. That's definitely within the straddle defense range. Pocket 7s, pocket 5s, ace 7, ace jack, ace 5, ace 9. All sorts of holdings that I guess can find a check raise here, just letting me blast it off with my top pair. And of course, we can only beat a bluff. This looks super strong. It looks like I have exactly what I have. And I did make a small wager here on the river, as mentioned. I bet about the size of the pot. So it's pretty tough to raise versus those types of bet sizes. And this is not a small raise, $5,500, tough to call down with just one pair. So after some consideration, some head scratching, and some displeasure with how this hand has gone down, tough to throw away top pair, strong kicker, but just going to give Nate credit here, of course. Chuck it in there. And we can see that Nate just wrecks us here with the queen jack, turns second pair into a bluff and gets the job done here. Had him absolutely smoked from the turn. We re-get there after he outflops us, and then he just punishes us big time with this raise. He turns over the queen, shows us the queen, and that is not a great sight because we could at least chop with that hand if you happen to have ace queen, but it's worse news. Bluffs us out of our shoes. Nice hand, Nate. They are just doing it to me. Unbelievable today. They're just doing it to me. All right, no breaks. Poker continues. Straddle is on in front of Ben's, and we see a raise from Brad in the +1 spot. We've got ourselves a suit connected here, the 6-5 of clubs. Once again, I think we could go either way. The raise does come from early position. A little bit less likely to 3-bet those kind of spots. And again, we just have one player behind us instead of 2 if we were in the small blind. So I decided to call, and Ben's calls as well. Flop is a pretty damn good one. 6-6-3 with 2 diamonds giving us trips. A very lovely sight. I check it. Ben's checks it. Unfortunately, Brad checks this one back, so we do not get to check raise this flop. Turn pairs the 3. And if we don't see a c-bet on this board, I think we want to start firing with a variety of holdings here. Maybe we flop a flush draw. Maybe we turn a flush draw. Maybe we have better than that. In this case, we do. I'm going to start going for some value here. $250 it is. Ben's is on it there immediately. And good sight is Brad dropping chips over the line. River's an interesting one. It's another 3, so there is a full house on the board. 3's full of 6s, but we can beat that. We've got 6s full of 3s here. Never checking goes without saying. We're going to go for some value. I want a lot of it. If he's got an overpair, he's probably never folding, even when I do size up. If he is a non-believer, if he's in a non-believing mood, maybe he's had a lot of cocktails, maybe he's absolutely hammered, tough to say, but maybe he'll find a call here versus a large wager anyway. I bet $1,100 going for that much in value. And apparently maybe it was a little bit too greedy because Brad is able to get away from it. Folds a full house. The full house is on the board, but it is a full house and can't get all the value that we would like, but we win $800 here. No straddle on in this next hand when Rampage comes in for the raise out of the cutoff spot to $150. We're in the small blind with ace-10 offsuit. Some quick deliberation on my part between 3-betting and flatting. Rampage does notice that. He says, did I angle him? It's definitely not an angle. I decided on a flat call, which is probably a little bit suspect. Probably want to go ahead and 3-bet this or fold this. Either way, heads up to a flop. Jack 3 deuce, 2 hearts. We've got ourselves the ace of hearts. I check it, and Rampage checks back pretty quickly here. Turns an ace, that gives us top pair, and it's going to make our line pretty straightforward here. Check it over to Rampage again. He's going to have the best aces, ace king, ace queen. That's the case when we don't 3-bet, so we're just going to have to check call and check call down here all the way, hoping that we can pick it off and not get value towned ourselves. $300 it is on the turn. I make the call, and we are off to a river card. That river card is an offsuit queen. We're just going to stick to the plan here. Check it over to Ethan once again. Ethan is definitely not a quitter, and he knows when to go for big value as well. This time he bets $1,500, and as mentioned, we have no choice whatsoever. We've got ourselves top pair versus a very capable opponent. We block straights, and even though this is no small sizing, in fact, it's an overbet, we've got ourselves top pair versus a guy named Rampage. Chucking it in there, hoping for the best. He announces straight. Thankfully, he's just joking. He doesn't have a straight. He has 10 high. We can be 10 high. We've got top pair. So good to drag in some chips later on in this session. Brings us down to minus 8,100 at this point. Could be better. Could be worse. Poker continues. No straddle on in this hand when we see Nate come in for the raise out of the hijack spot. $200. Rampage calls. Jason calls. Over to us in the big blind, looking down at a premium holding. With all these guys in the pot before us, we've got ourselves a 100% squeeze spot here with the ace-king offsuit. $200, not going to be the amount to play for, boys. Let's try $1,400. Nate, he's got himself the king-10 suited, 40% of a royal flush. I wouldn't throw that away. You guys know that. But Nate decides better of it. Gets out of there. We had him dominated. Rampage not getting a great price. Lets his pocket threes go. Jason has a worse ace. We've got the best ace. $600 profit without too much confrontation. Now, as if this game couldn't get even more legendary, it has, because Vince Van Patten has joined us in the #1 seat. The World Poker Tour legend himself has joined our creator game. So, as mentioned, just an unbelievably fun group of people here. Easily amongst my top favorite lineups that I've ever played at in any poker game. What a crew that we have here. Yours truly puts the straddle on in this hand. $100 to go. Action over to Frankie in the dealer spot. Raises it up to $300. We've got an ace. We're going to have to defend here. Heads up to a flop. Jack 6-5 rainbow doesn't give us a ton to work with or be excited about, but it is an ace. An ace is the highest card in the deck. The ace of spades, the prettiest one of all. So when we check it, and Frankie bets $325, we got ace high, backdoor straights. I'm calling. Turn gives us an open ender. That's going to allow us to proceed versus virtually all wagers, but Frankie decides to not find a wager. River pairs the 7. We're left with ace high here. Going to be interesting if we do face another wager now. I check it, and Frankie makes it easy on us. He checks it back. We get to show down our ace high. That is the winner versus the king 9. Turn to gut shot. Wasn't going to work on the turn, maybe on the river, buddy, but I'm stuck, so you never know. Next hand here, Vince with the under the gun straddle up to $100, and Brad finds the raise in the +1 spot up to $250. Several participants here. Rampage calls in the cutoff. Jason calls in the dealer button, and we've got 10s in the small blind. Lots of money out there, and a pretty damn good hand. Pocket 10s. If we go ahead and 3-bet, we face a 4-bet from Brad in the +1 spot. It's not going to be super comfortable, but I think we're going to go for it anyway. 10s rates to be the best hand so far. Going to go ahead and put in the 3-bet. I make it $1,300 to go. Turns out that is going to get the job done. We do, in fact, have the best hand here. Pocket 10s, some guys sharing some aces and such. No one is going to be able to continue. Jason does think about it for a bit, but eventually lets it go. $900 in profit. All right, getting down to it here. Rampage with the $100 straddle this time. We look down at king 6 suited in the +2 spot. Trying to create some action, trying to create some things. Raise it up, $250 to go. Only Rampage makes the call and defends his straddle. Heads up to a flop that comes down pretty damn favorable for the king 6 of diamonds. It comes down all blue cards. That gives us a king high flush, and of course we are wagering. We're going to bet a small amount of money here on these monotone boards. I bet $125. Great news is that Rampage makes the call. Turn 10 of diamonds, not our favorite card, even though we have an open-ended straight flush draw. Got a royal draw here, makes it perhaps slightly more likely that we do not have the best hand now, and it could also kill our action. Rampage checks it. I'm going to try and make a royal flush here. I decided to check it back here. We do not. We make a simple straight to go along with our flush. Rampage checks it over to us once again. Obviously, it feels like we have the best hand here all the time. We bet $400 going for value versus all worst flushes. That is, in fact, what Rampage has. He's got the 3 high flush. Would he have called 2 additional streets? Probably not, but you never know. Either way, $850 in profit in this hand. All right, the final hand of the evening, of the stream, of the game, of our vlog. And it's no ordinary hand. This is a bomb pot. Each person coming in for $100, and all players are going to go to the flop. And we see we've got ourselves pocket queens here in a bomb pot. And we see an incredibly favorable flop here. We see the flop of Queen 6-5 rainbow. Rampage immediately ejects upon seeing this flop. He's got himself King Deuce offsuit here, just decides to let it go from early position. And it's over to us. We have to decide whether to start putting money into this pot or decide to slow play it. Considering that it's dry here, I decide on that route. If there was a flush out there, I would for sure bet. And maybe considering everyone's range is 100%, maybe we could just start going for value here. But I think we're going to slow play. In any instances, in a bomb pot, this has to rank up there pretty highly. I let Rampage sweat my cards, give him a little bit of a taste of what we have going for us in this hand. He checks it out while everyone else checks around on the flop. Turn has to introduce some possibilities here. It's the 3 of spades, second spade, and now the board is definitely connected here. 2 pairs and straight draws and flush draws should all become available in this spot. So when Jason Somerville bets $50, I don't think that's nearly enough money. Top set here, I think we want to go for some additional value. I raise it up here to $400. That is a casual 8x his $50 wager. And very quickly on my direct left, Benz puts in the 3-bet on the turn here up to $1,450. Kind of love it, maybe slightly worried, not sure. Gets kind of interesting. Vince thinks about it for a little bit, decides to let go of the 5-3. He turned 2 pair. That's going to be a great fold from Vince. Brad has Jack Deuce, nothing but a gutter. Nate and Frankie are out of there. Jason's got a Jack high flush draw. He decides to let that go. And we've got ourselves a little bit of a spot here. Let's take a sip of the 805. Think about what we want to do here, but I already know what I'm going to do. We are not going to flat call here. We are not going to let a free card roll off of here. We're going to ship it in there. All in for all the money. If we happen to get snapped off here by a straight, well, at least we have some outs. But we've got ourselves a very strong hand here. We want to play for all of it. We don't get snap called, and we can listen in to what Benz has to say here. Massive turn card, as it turns out, no pun intended. 5-4 of spades for Benz turns the open-ended straight flush draw. It's as good of a card as he could have asked for. Turns out he's still behind. We've got 68% equity in this spot. Now, as mentioned, Benz is a slot player, not a poker player, slots player and content creator. And in these kinds of spots, I think it's best to let that person who is a guest in these kinds of games decide if we want to go once or twice. Benz says he'd like to go twice. 2 times it is, dealer. Casual $18,300 pot on the very last hand of the stream.
10 of clubs. Okay. That one's Andrew.
He's free rolling.
At least What a sweat. All right. Chop it up.
Lock up the first board on that first run out, but unfortunately we cannot hold on the second one. A lot of these times when these are, 60-40s, 70-30s, and you run it twice, it will end up in a chop, but we are definitely having some regret about running it twice there. But as mentioned, I do think it's the right move. Got to let the guests, as mentioned, decide whether to run it once or twice. Winning that pot would have gotten us out of Stuckville, but unfortunately it is not the case. The graphics are off by about $100. We lose $5,025 in this game. It was a wild one. It was a fun one, an awesome lineup, some swings along the way. And I told Jamie Kerstetter, who put this game together, that it was definitely the most fun $5,000 that I've lost in any poker game.